You just failed at something. Maybe a job, maybe a relationship, maybe a version of yourself you were sure would work out. It feels personal. It feels final. But the real answer is far stranger than bad luck. There is a man in an ancient story who failed harder than you ever will. His own brothers hated him. They threw him into a pit and sold him as a slave. He was 17 years old. Do you think he saw a future in that pit? His name was Joseph. Genesis chapter 37 says his brothers stripped him of his coat, the one his father gave him, and threw him into an empty well. Then they sat down to eat a meal while he screamed below them. That is not the beginning of a success story. That is the ending of one. He was carried to Egypt. He became a servant in the house of a man named Potiphar. And for a while, things actually got better. He was trusted. He was promoted. He was given authority over an entire household. Then Potiphar's wife accused him of a crime he did not commit, and he was thrown into prison. Failure after failure. Betrayal after betrayal. Historians studying ancient Egyptian administration have found records of foreign-born officials rising through household and prison systems, exactly the kind of structure Genesis describes. Some scholars point to Semitic names appearing in Egyptian records from roughly this period as evidence that stories like Joseph's reflect a real and documented pattern, not an isolated legend. The details are not fantasy. They mirror a world that actually existed. In prison, Joseph met a royal cupbearer and correctly interpreted his dream. He asked for one thing in return. Remember me. Genesis chapter 40 says, the cupbearer forgot him anyway. For 2 more years, nothing happened. 2 years of silence. Can you imagine believing your purpose has passed you by? Then, without warning, Pharaoh had a dream nobody could interpret. The cupbearer finally remembered. Joseph was pulled from a prison cell and placed in front of the most powerful man in the ancient world. Within 1 day, he went from forgotten prisoner to second in command of Egypt, 13 years. That is how long the pit, the house, and the prison lasted before the throne. Here is what most people miss about this story. Every failure was not a delay. It was a rehearsal. The betrayal taught him what it felt like to be powerless. The false accusation taught him what it felt like to be falsely judged. The forgotten promise taught him patience that no comfortable life could have built. By the time he stood in front of Pharaoh, he was not improvising. He was ready. Years later, famine spread across the region, and his brothers came to Egypt seeking grain, not knowing the ruler standing before them was the boy they had thrown away. Genesis 50 records what he told them. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, not despite the pit, because of it. This is where the story stops being ancient. Think about your own timeline for a moment. The job that fell apart, the relationship that ended badly, the plan that collapsed right when you needed it most. What if none of it was wasted? What if it was building something in you that comfort never could? Failure has a way of feeling like proof that you're not enough. But maybe it is closer to training than punishment. Maybe the version of you that gets through the hard season is the only version equipped to handle what comes after it. Joseph could not have ruled Egypt with the heart of the boy who was thrown into that pit. He needed the pit to become someone else entirely. The house taught him responsibility. The false accusation taught him integrity under pressure. The prison taught him how to wait without giving up. None of that could be learned any other way. So when your plans collapse and your patience runs out and the promise feels forgotten, ask yourself what Joseph could not have known while he was still underground. Not whether this is the end, whether this is the preparation. And when the door finally opens, you will understand exactly why it did not open sooner. You just failed at something. Maybe that failure is not the end of your story. Maybe it is the only way your story was ever going to begin.